Hey, what's up, guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. Reuters reported that China to land probe on dark side of moon in 2018, Xinhua. And basically, China plans to land a probe on the dark side of the moon. Now, I know there's so many conspiracies regarding the moon, and we've certainly seen an increase of that in the last year with the lunar wave and the flat earth theory. It caused everyone to question everything about anything that's above us over our head. And part of me thinks that perhaps this is the first step in engineering a large-scale deception in the social atmosphere of the planet. So there's interest in this story because whether China really is going to the dark side of the moon to land a probe, we can question the motives, and they're so wide in terms of possibilities with the moon now that it makes it hard to grapple with. But I think it's worth taking a look at and to process through our thinking about what's happening, because ultimately, in my personal opinion here, my humble opinion, I do think, and you can think I'm wrong, but I do think that there is something like an outer space above us where, whether that is dimensional or perhaps when we're talking about spiritual and physical, it's talking about the same thing where something changes at the neuropsychological level. And so now we have people who supposedly live in that environment, and the further out you go, the weirder it gets, right? The physical and spiritual probably ceases to maintain its boundaries. So I think there is a physical space, but I do think that they overlap spiritual consequences in many different ways. And that's why I've always held the belief that biblically, we're not meant to necessarily go out into space. Now, some people get upset when they hear that, but I'm talking about the human condition, physically, physiologically, and everything else. We're sort of meant to be on the ground, to eat from the ground and just be on the ground. That's, how we're created. Now, some people say, oh, it's an exploration. You have to explore your environment, and to go up and, into space is this grand pursuit of humanity. Well, that's really interesting because a lot of people that say that are, usually atheistic, materialistic. But if you think about it, that is a spiritual statement. It plays on a very human-centered pursuit for knowledge about creation. God created us, and some people might argue that God created us to explore space. And at a certain level, I don't dismiss that idea entirely, because there are certain passages that seem to reflect on having some believers out in space. But anyways, it's fascinating. I don't know exactly what's going on, but there's certainly some intrigue here. In this article, it says here that advancing China's space program has been a priority of leaders, with President Xi Jinping calling for China to establish itself as a space power. China insists that its space program is for peaceful purposes. However, the US Defense Department has highlighted China's increasing space capabilities, saying it was pursuing activities aimed at preventing its adversaries from using space-based assets during a crisis. What an interesting statement coming out of Reuters. If you think about that, you're talking about perhaps space weapons. We tracked some of this last year, and we don't know for sure if what we saw was a space weapon, but there were some questions being asked in that direction. And then the US Department of Defense responding almost hostile in some ways, saying it was pursuing, accusing China of pursuing activities aimed at preventing its adversaries from using space-based assets during a crisis. So that means the US Department of Defense, and behind that, I think, a secret space program, has together some sort of space-based asset that can be used during a crisis. What's that mean? Is that just satellites, or what else does it control? And it's interesting to see that we have really developed corporate entities for space. Yes, NASA is still involved with this whole structure, but now the corporate fronts, these private organizations, have come out to be the space representatives of the West, whereas now they're creating this pseudo-war almost in space, coming from China, saying, oh, we have a new space race between the US and China. And we brought that up last year, but one of the things that the article stated last year was that it would be a three-way race between China, US, and Russia. Well, interestingly enough, Russia recently has come out and said that they want to build a moon base by 2030. Now, why would Russia want to come out and build a moon base by 2030, which happens to be the same year the 2030 UN agenda is, right? That the world is pretty much picked up on. And at the same time, you have China saying they're sending a probe there now. They're not going to wait till 2030. We're sending something up there by 2018 to check out the dark side of the moon. Is it actual political posturing? I mean, in one sense it is at one level, and all the drama that's therein. But also at the next level, does this mean that somebody out there has assets in space already that are positioned, that are postured, that are ready to be deployed in some way? Or is it in conjunction with some sort of beyond human intelligence? I'll leave all the specific speculations to you guys and connect your own dots as you try to piece together this crazy puzzle. But those are the pieces, and whatever paradigm you want to process this information through, you got to admit that this is fascinating. And as a Christian, someone who believes in Bible prophecy, this kind of stuff gives us a whole new perspective of how to understand prophetic passages. And the thing that I want everybody to know is that Bible prophecy is not fear-mongering, okay? It's the study of the end times, and biblically, it tells us that there's something that's going to go really wrong. This Antichrist figure, this thing that's going to appear, this huge lie, it's not going to be good. And you have to admit that most people are starting to sort of see that. And if that's the case, then what we're preaching over here from this ancient scripture and the ultimate implications, which is found in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, then you'd come to understand that even this was part of God's overall plan. Like, this was part of his grand story. And biblically speaking, a lot of these crazy things that are recorded, not just the Bible, but I think throughout history, a lot of weird things have been recorded and been spiritualized. I just happen to believe that the Bible contains within a certain level of authority over other documents, and I have my reasons for that. But you have these events like the Tower of Babel recorded, which was a significant event at a time in human history when there were specifically unique circumstances to posit certain situations and scenarios, such as trying to reach heaven. And we're doing just that. In this last century was really what kicked it off. And now into the 2000s, we have seen increase in that in the geopolitical realm, in a new space race of our modern era. And we'll just have to see how it all plays out. But you can see how it ties in from the gospel all the way to this stuff, the stuff that you might think has no connection whatsoever. What does the resurrection of Jesus Christ, dying for my sins and yours, by the way, what does that have anything to do with space and going to the moon and creating moon bases? Well, it might actually have everything to do with it. So that's why I think we should keep an eye on this stuff and just keep our finger on the pulse. Thanks for watching my video. Please share it with friends, family, and whoever else you think might benefit from this information. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel and dig around the archives. I have hundreds of videos covering topics ranging from angels, aliens, and the Antichrist to global conspiracies of the New World Order, eugenics, genetics, Genesis 6, the Nephilim, transhumanism, and much, much more. And don't forget to check out my full-length documentaries, Age of Deceit, Fallen Angels, and the New World Order, and Age of Deceit 2, Alchemy, and the Rise of the Beast Image, all of which you can watch for free right here on the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. And if you want even more content, check out CanaryCryRadio.com, our podcast where we investigate similar issues and interview all kinds of experts on several different topics. In fact, we just finished episode 100, which is 7 hours long, where we interviewed 26 people in one podcast episode. You can find the podcast at CanaryCryRadio.com or go subscribe to the Canary Cry Radio YouTube channel. Again, thanks for watching and have an awesome day. God bless.